What's up, Notjust developers? My name is Vadim and welcome to another project-based tutorial. Today, I'm very excited to present you a very special project. Today, we're gonna build an AI-powered Google Translate clone. We're gonna do that, of course, with React Native, Supabase, OpenAI, and a lot of other tools that will help you build cross-platform mobile and web applications. So, our project is going to have the following features. First of all, obviously, we're going to need a text translation from different languages. Then we're going to also have text-to-speech so that the users can use their microphone. They can use their microphone to speak, and then we are going to translate that. And obviously, we're going to also have speech-to-text to put in words on in a sound that text that was translated. This project is going to be built for iOS and Android on mobile and also for the web. For the, what we're going to use for the tech stack, obviously we're going to use React Native with Expo and Expo router. For the styling, we're going to use Native Wind, which allows us to use Tailwind CSS classes in React Native. If you have experience from the web with Tailwind, you're going to see how easy it is to style using Native Wind because everything is powered by the Tailwind classes. If not, I'm going to show you, you're gonna love it. For the backend, we're going to use Supabase and specifically Supabase edge functions because we need some backend code, some server code that will do the interactions with OpenAI in a secure way so that our private keys are protected. For that, we're going to use Supabase edge functions, and there we're going to interact with OpenAI to provide the translations, to provide the text-to-speech and speech-to-text. We're going to also then host everything, the web version of our application. For that, we're going to use Tiiny.host, which is actually the sponsor of today's video. Tiny is the literally simplest way you can host a web application. And in fact, instead of telling me about that, let me actually show you how easy it is. For example, go ahead and open up the URL that will open Tiiny.host. And here I have the project that we are going to build today. I have exported the web application as a static website. So here I have the folder with the index and so on, with the assets, JavaScript, styles, and everything. All I have to do is go ahead and compress this directory and drag and drop here on Tiny. After I create an account with my Gmail, you can also use GitHub. Some magic is happening, and bada beep, bada boom, in a second we should have our project hosted and accessible by anyone. This is easy to use to share project, to share presentation, pitch decks, anything in a simple way. So, do I need to? Yes. Our application also works on iOS. Here it is. I can do hello here to translate from English to Spanish. I have hola, hola. I can go ahead and play the sound there. And what's happening here? Maybe I need to log in. Let me go ahead to log in my account. And here I have the project that was just published. I'm going to go ahead, open it up, and here we have a URL that we can share with anyone. And here we have the project that we're going to build today. So I can say hello there to translate. It's still loading. I think my Expo application is loading a bit slower, or my web server is not working. Let's see. I'm gonna allow the microphone. I'm gonna say hello here. I'm gonna try to translate, and I have the translation as well. And yeah, the public one just took a little bit time for Expo to load all the styles and the JavaScript. But now I can interact even with here. How are you doing? You can do that. Takes a bit of time for the OpenAI to translate, but then we have the output. And I should be able to use the microphone. Let's see, let's test it out. And in a second, it should translate the speech. Yes, let's see, let's test it out, and then I can see the translation as well. So that's the web version hosted with Tiny. If you're interested, you can also, you can also save 10% with notjust.dev code at the checkout if you want to upgrade your account. The free account allows you to do a lot, but if you want to upgrade, use this code, save 10%. And if you're ready, we can get started. I have prepared a step-by-step guide for you. So if you want to access it, go to assets at notjust.dev/translate. There I have everything, like all the code snippets, all the dummy data that you're gonna need to follow along. And that's actually the best way to build and to learn building this project, to do it together with me. The link you'll also find in the description of our video. You're gonna find it here under the assets. And then you should have this guide. All right, let me see, what are you guys doing? Hello everyone who is joining us live. Are you ready to build this application? Let me pop out the chat so I can see it. Okay, I'll bring it here somewhere. Okay, now I can see. Hello, Leonardo. Hello, Coders Lofi. Hello, Michael, OG Arda, Rogelio. How are you doing? Francesco. How is that course going, Francesco? From Rogul Island. Anyway, we have a lot of things to do today, so we better get started. I'm gonna go ahead and probably stop this server, and we're gonna start everything from scratch together. All right, so let's open up a terminal where we're gonna initialize our project. I'm going to zoom in first so that you can see it better. And let's navigate to the folder where we keep our projects. In my case, it's projects. Come on. And here, I'm going to use the Create Expo stack. I'm gonna use this Create Expo stack tool to initialize a new project. This Create Expo stack is very configurable and allows us to initialize projects with some defaults that will be easy for us to work with. For example, we're gonna have native Win setup, Supabase, and so on. So go ahead and do npx create expo stack. I'm gonna do at latest to take the latest version. And here, let's give our application a name, for example, Google Translate. Would like to use TypeScript? Yes, let's use TypeScript. Let's go with npm. Here for the navigation, I'm gonna choose Expo Router and specifically the Stack Navigator. And I'm gonna use the native Wind library for the styling. And for authentication, I'm gonna select Supabase. No EAS for now, and let's go ahead and do it like this. If you want to, if you don't want to go through the interactive guide yourself, you can just copy paste the command that you see here. I also left it in the guide that you can take, and it will initialize it with Expo Router, Native Wind, and Supabase. Let's wait for a second for npm to initialize our project, and then we're going to be ready to run it. Ayap is saying, hey, share with us advanced concepts like testing, code push debugging, React Native Web App Circle, Storybook. Thank you for your effort. Waiting for your React Native Mastery course. Thank you very much for the recommendations. I'm gonna see, definitely we're gonna cover some of the stuff here, but for the very advanced things, we have our React Native Mastery course where I'm going to try to include as much of the advanced topics as possible. Christopher is saying, I'm subscribed to you and for some reason I didn't get the notification. Hey, 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 hope you're good. Thank you very much. I'm not sure what happened there with YouTube. But in fact, I thought that the live stream is 1 hour earlier, so I was ready to push start live, and then I saw that it's scheduled for 1 hour later, so I just waited for the right time to get started. Hello, Yaoop. Thank you very much. Hello, Ajay from Ivory Coast. Okay, so here we have our project. Let's go ahead and open it in Visual Studio Code by running code and the name of our project. This, we don't need any more of a terminal because we are going to go ahead and right away open the terminal in our Visual Studio Code. You can go at the top, terminal, new terminal. And from here, let's go ahead and do npm start to start the development server. This is where we're going to interact with the Expo development server. The easiest way to run the application if you don't have simulators set up is going to be to download the Expo Go application from the market, available both on iOS and Android, and scan this QR code. In my case, I have an iOS simulator here. We're going to test it on Android as well. And I'm going to press I as shown here to open it on iOS simulator. I'm going to also press R to reload so that we reload the new application there. And here we have our template. We have a simple screen with a button and actually 2 screens that we can navigate back and forth. This is coming from the Stack Navigator from Expo Router. All right, so because we're using Expo Router, all the screens of our application are defined in the directory application or app. So here in the app, we have this index, which is the home screen that you see here on the right. And the details is the detail screen that we navigate by pressing that button. We're not gonna need a lot of screens, and I'm not gonna explain too much about Expo Router. For that, we have other tutorials. Most of our work is going to happen in the index.tsx, which is the home screen. So open up application index.tsx, and here is where we're gonna do all of our work. First of all, I'm going to remove this container, and I'm gonna start by rendering a simple text component that I'm going to import from React Native. Let me delete everything and do import text from React Native. And I'm gonna start by rendering hello world, obviously. Let's do hello world. And here we have hello world at the top. So if everything is refreshing, if you see the updates automatically displayed on your device or simulator, then everything is good and we can continue working. I'm just gonna stop for a second to show you about Native Wind and how we're gonna style our components. The way we're gonna style it is by not using style sheets or JavaScript, is by providing class name to our component. And the class names we're gonna provide here are coming from Tailwind. For example, if I want to make this text large, I'm gonna do, if I'm not mistaken, text to XL, and this will make the text larger. If I want a bold font, I'm gonna use font bold, and it's gonna become bold. If I want a different color, I'm gonna do color blue 500. That's going to be bluish. If I want a darker, I'm gonna do 800. If I want lighter, 300. And the same way, we're gonna apply all of these styles through class names. If you are new to this, it's going to be a bit difficult for you to know everything. So I recommend opening up tailwindcss.com, and here for quick search, go ahead and search for what you need. For example, you need some margin. Go ahead, search for margin, and you're gonna see the utility classes to apply margin. So for example, if I apply a margin, I don't know, yeah, there are a lot of classes, but you see that it's the class name there is M and following a number. For example, M10 is going to, where is it? M10 is going to add some margin around our text. 10 doesn't mean that this is pixels, because even if we hover, we see that the margin that was applied is actually 40 pixels. This is the different steps, for example, starting with margin 1, 2, 3, and so on. You can also add only on the horizontal axis, MX, or only on the vertical, MY, margin left, ML, or margin top, MT. So you get the idea. It's learning these classes comes with time, with using it more and more. I have experience with Tailwind on the web, so for me, a lot of things make sense. Sometimes I forget like what I need to do, what classes I need to use, and I just go to Tailwind, I search, and in 90% of cases, everything is going to work as you see here on Tailwind, because Native Wind is basically Tailwind for React Native. So now that we are on the same page with the styling, I think we can get started and build our user interface, right? Let's see. Yes, here is our UI. This is the goal that we need to achieve. On the left, we see how it looks on iOS. On the right, we see how it looks on the web. Let me also try to keep track of everything for different commits. You're gonna have a source code at the end. So let's do git add, git commit, cleanup, or initial cleanup. Voice load, please. Is the sound too little, too low? I hope it's good. If not, maybe I can increase it a bit. I'm not in my usual studio, so I don't have all my setup. I am back in my home country, in Moldova, and we are actually having our wedding very, very soon, like in a couple of weeks. So it's an interesting time, like managing everything, prepare for the wedding, preparing this build for you guys, trying to do. Sound. What's wrong with the sound? Come on, sound. Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm gonna try to speak louder maybe. Will this video be 4 hours? It's gonna be as long as it needs to be to cover all the cases. Translation, UI, backend, speech to text, text to speech. So it's going to be between 3 and 4 hours. Okay, so let's go ahead, have a look at the UI that we have to build and start slowly building it. I'm gonna start with the top part, from top to bottom. At the top, we have the language selector. So let me go ahead and add here some comments. So first, we're gonna have a language selector row. Then we're gonna have the input container that contains input and the microphone and so on. So let's do input container. And at the bottom, we're gonna have the output container. So let's focus on the language selector. This is quite simple. It has 2 texts and 1 icon. So let's go ahead and start by creating a view, which is a normal container, in which we're gonna put first a text with the language, for example, English, and another text with Spanish. We see them there. I'm going to remove the hello world text, and I'm going to focus only on this English and Spanish. Let's go ahead and put them in the same row. To do that, we need to apply some styles on the parent container, on the view. So using class names, I'm going to say that we want it the flex direction to be flex row, and they are in the same row. Now we want to put the spaces, to manage the space inside this container, to put them between the child items. So I'm gonna use justify around maybe, and this will spread them apart. Let's go ahead and give this container some padding, like padding 5. That's better. And probably that's it on the container. On the text itself, let's go ahead with a class name. We need to change to make it bold and to change the color. So to make it bold, I'm gonna use font bold. And to change the color, I'm gonna use color, blue, and maybe 500 or 600. Let's go with 600. Let's copy paste the class name for the second text component as well. And here we have it. Maybe not bold, maybe semi-bold will look better. Yeah, let's do it like this. Okay, that's good. Now to put the icon between the two texts, let's go ahead and open Expo icons, Expo vector icons. And here, let's search for replace or something like arrows. Find here the icon that works best. I'm gonna check in the guide like what icon we used there. And we used a font awesome 5 exchange alt. So let me search here exchange alt. Here it is from font awesome 5. Let's go ahead and import them in our application at the top and render the font awesome 5 between the two text components like this. For the size, probably it needs like 18, and the color gray is going to be okay. Maybe not even 18, 16 is going to be enough. Perfect. I'm not very happy with how the space is managed because the texts, depending on their length, will change where the icon is displayed. So if the first one is longer, the icon is going to be moving away. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that, or maybe we can think about these small issues later. They will appear, but not now. For now, it's good. Okay, so we have a language selector. Perfect. Let's go ahead and see what's next from our user interface. The next step is going to be the input container. So the input container has, first of all, that text input where we can write something. On the right of it, it has an icon to translate or to send. And on the bottom, it has another row with the microphone and a text. So that means that the input container is going to be a view which will have two parts. It will have a first part, a view where we're going to have the input and the send button. And below it, it's going to have another row where we're going to have the microphone icon and something else. Okay, let's start with the input. To render a text input in React Native, we're going to use the text input component from React Native. Very obvious. Anyway, let's go ahead here and render the text input. By default, we're not going to see anything, but the text input is actually there. And to see it, we're going to add a placeholder here. What's the placeholder? What's the placeholder? Is it, I don't know, enter your text. And right away, we're going to see the text input there, where we can write something. Let's go ahead and do what? Add a class name to our text input and increase the font size. Font L, or not font, it's going to be text LG for large. Okay, that's good. And the text input is going to be multi-line. And now I can write text, I can press enter, and I can have multiple lines here. Let's put it from new lines like this. If I save it, it's going to go back, obviously. But I'm going to add also the maximum length of this text to be 5,000. Come on, why are you going from new line? What else? What else? Class name. Okay, that's good for now. Let's go ahead and add the send button, which is going to be another icon. Let me check in the guide what icon did we use there. And we use a font awesome 6 circle arrow right. So go ahead, search for this icon on Expo vector icons. And this is the one that we're going to use, imported from another font family, from a newer font family. So below font awesome 5, let's import font awesome 6 and let's render this icon right after the text input. It's going to be rendered below. We're going to handle that in a second. But let's change the color from black to royal blue. This is a bit closer to the color blue 600, which is not exactly the same color, but anyway. Okay, let's go ahead and on the parent view that has both the text input and font awesome, let's put these two items on the same row. So with a class name flex row, we're gonna be in the same row. Now the text input needs to expand on the width to take all the available space on that row. So let's give it a flex 1, and this way it's going to maximize its width as much as possible and leave room only for the icon there. And on the parent component, we can manage the gap by using gap 5. We're going to add some spacing between the text input itself and the icon. So as you can see, it doesn't go till the icon there. Okay, that's good. The padding, right, is too close to the borders. I'm going to manage it at the input container part by saying here class name. Should I use padding 5? Let's go. Let's see. Padding 3 maybe is enough. Like this. I'm not sure why the icon looks that it's a bit higher than the input itself. If I do background gray 100, not for the placeholder but for the class name, 300. We see that, yeah, the icon and the text input are actually in the same row, but visually it appears that it's a bit higher. I don't know. We can maybe put them in the same line, items center, and this will put the icon on the same line as, yeah. Maybe that's good. And the text input itself, let me see here, what else do we have? Well, we have a border at the bottom to see the separation. So let's add it at the input container level as border bottom 1, or just border bottom. Border B is going to add the border on the bottom, and border color, come on, border gray 200 is going to change the color of it, maybe 300. Yeah, that's better. And the text input, I think we need to give it a minimum height, because we want it to be at least some amount of, to have some height initially. So let's give it a minimum height, something like 24, maybe even more, 30, 32. Okay, that's better. I don't really like the item center here when the icon is in the bottom. Maybe for the icon itself, but I'll leave it like this. So now the text input has a minimum height, as you can see here. And when we go over it, it's going to expand to as much as it is needed. Okay, so that is our text input. That's the first part of our input container. Now below it, we're going to have a microphone, and on the right, the amount of characters. Let's go ahead and do that. We need to do it outside this view. So this is our top part of the input container, and outside this view, yeah, we have here the microphone icon. I was confused by this comment. That's why I don't like writing comments. Below this view, we have another container where we need to put the microphone icon. So the microphone icon, let's take it from where? From FontAwesome 5 microphone. So I'm gonna render it inside this view as FontAwesome 5 or 6. 6 with a name microphone. Okay, we see it there. For the size, I'm gonna give it 18. And for the color, let's also give it a gray or a dim gray. Maybe a dim gray to be a bit darker. Okay, so that's our microphone icon there. And on the other side of the screen, we need to render the amount of characters. We're going to display it in a text. So let's do text. There we're going to have, for example, 0 out of 5,000 characters. Let's put them in the same row by adding a class name to the parent view flex row, and we need to push them to the different opposite sides by adding justify between. So put the space between these two items. Now the text is on the right side, and the text itself, I'm going to give it a color gray 500. That's good. I think that's perfect. So in a second, we're gonna manage like this part as well. But for now, that's our input. And if I'm not mistaken, that's everything that we need here. We actually have another border below the language selector. So I'm thinking, should we just add besides the border bottom, also border T for border top? And my question is there a border for horizontal axis like border Y? Yes, it actually is. If I do Y, it adds both on the top and the bottom. Perfect. So now we added to the input container, both on the top and the bottom, some borders. Okay, so that is our input container. I don't like the spacings. I have what? P5. I have padding 5. So let's, instead of P3, let's give P5. And now we have a little bit more padding. Nice. Okay, let's do the same for the output container. And our output container goes right below our first box. And as you can see from the structure, it's very similar to our top part. Maybe I can even copy paste it, but maybe that's going to confuse, and it's better to write it ourselves again. So let's start with a view that has the top part. Now, the main content of this output is just a text box. It doesn't have anything on the right, so I'm going to render it as text output. We have it here, and for the bottom part here, we're gonna have a similar view with icons as we had for the input container. So let's just copy paste it and put this here. Hey, what's going on? I made a mistake and what did I do? Let me try to reopen Expo Go. Hello, Mahkabek from Turkmenistan. How are you doing? Guide post is not found. Guide post is not found. Let me try to send it here in the chat for a second. And I'm gonna double check why that URL is not found. Okay, back to our application. We have this footer. And we have a microphone, which should be a speaker. So the name of that icon is volume high. So instead of microphone here, let's do volume high for a speaker icon. And for the text, instead of text, we're going to have another icon for the clipboard, copy, which comes from Font Awesome 5. So let's render Font Awesome 5, name clipboard, size 18, and color dim gray. Okay, is that what we need? Copy. Oh, it's not clipboard, it's simply copy the icon. Yes, perfect. Now on the parent view, let's go ahead and give here a class name starting with padding 5 to have the same amount of spacings around, and a gap 5 maybe to have some space between around them. I'm gonna give this container a background color, so BG gray 400, BG gray 400, maybe 300 is going to be better. Yes, exactly. And for the text itself, I'm gonna give the same minimum height as we had for the text input. So let's actually copy the class name from the text input and give it to our output text to mimic the same thing with X, but in this case we don't need flex 1, so remove flex 1 from here. So just like that, our output text is also large and also has a minimum height of 32. Perfect. I think that's exactly what we need, right? Text. I think in our case, in the guide, I had not large, but XL, which is even larger. So let's go with an even larger text for the text input and also for the output, like this. Okay, so here is our UI. This is everything we needed for the UI for now. We're gonna add things later, but for now that's good. So let me go ahead and do git add, git commit -m UI, and we have it ready. Hello Ahmed, thank you very much for the message. Ahmed is saying, hello Vadim, you have made a remarkable impact. Your efforts, Your efforts have not gone unnoticed. Thank you for invaluable contribution and for being a true inspiration. Thank you very much, Ahmed. I really appreciate it. We are with Tailwind. Great. You are back. Oh, so there was some issues with my maybe internet connection? Is there any alternative to OpenAI? Because OpenAI can be used in some countries. I'm going to talk about alternatives when we get there. There are definitely alternatives to OpenAI. Hello, George from Kenya. How are you doing? Okay. What I want to do now is I want to keep track of what is the user typing in our input here. I want to keep track in a state variable because we will need it later to send it to the backend. And also, let's say we need to display the amount of characters that the input has. At the moment, there is no way to access the value of a text input. For that, we need to store that value in a state variable and send it to the text input. So let's go ahead and first import use state hook from React. Here it is. Let's go ahead and declare the state variable inside our home component at the top. We're gonna do it as input set input use state, and we define here the initial value, which is an empty string. So the use state will give us two values back, the actual value of our state and a function that we need to call whenever we want to update the state, update the value. So let's go take this input and say, hey, text input, always use the value that we have here in our input state. That's one way, but now if I try to type, it will all the time it will go back to an empty string because the input is always empty string and it's never updated using the setter. Now we need to also say text input. Whenever the user writes something and you want to change the text, on change text, the value that you're gonna get there, go ahead and call the set input setter and update our input value. Now if I'm going to type something, it's displayed here and I can use the input state, for example here, to display the input dot length between the curly brackets to be able to access a JavaScript value. So now as I type, we see that we are keeping track of what the user is typing and we have access to it to display it on the UI, to use it, to send it to that backend, and so on. Whenever we have these arrow functions, I wrote that on Twitter previous week. Whenever we have arrow functions that have exactly the same parameters here as the function that we actually have to call, and we are not doing any extra modifications to the value, we are just getting the value and sending it here. Instead of defining the arrow function, we can simplify it by simply sending the reference to our function itself. So now it's going to work as well, but in this case, it's much less text and a bit more readable in my opinion. So that's a small difference. So now we have a text here, and what do we need to do? Let's go ahead and when we press on this button, let's copy this text in the output. So for that, we're going to need another state variable for the output. So let's do output set output use state is going to be initially empty string 1 second. And we're going to define a function on translate or on send on translate that will later actually do the translation. Const translation equal to something. At the moment we're simply going to copy it from the input, and based on that translation, let's go ahead and update our output with translation. When do we want to call the onTranslate method? We want to call it when we press on this send button, which is after the input, the circle arrow right. So let's give here a onPress callback and send here the onTranslate function that we just defined. Now, nothing is going to happen. I mean, the function is going to be called, but we never use the output value itself. Let's go ahead and use it in the output container. Instead of this text, let's render the output state value. Now there is nothing there, but if I write something here and press send, it's going to be copied to the output. Later, it's going to be actually a translation, but for now, we see how it works. And in fact, on mobile, the way Google Translate works is that if there is no output, it doesn't even show this container. That means that we can conditionally render this container only if we have some output. To conditionally render, we're gonna wrap the container in the curly brackets from top to bottom, this view. And before rendering the view, we're gonna add a condition. If output, if it has a value, with AND operator, we're gonna only then render the container itself. Now, we don't see the container, but as soon as we press send, the output is going to get a value. We're gonna render the container with the text of the translation. If I go back to empty string and press send again, it's going to disappear because output is gonna become false, and false when evaluating false and any other value, it's always going to be false. So JavaScript simply optimizes how it evaluates this logical expression. And whenever it sees that output is false, it's not even going to look at the right side of the AND operator. This is shortly why the AND operator works as a logical or a conditional rendering mechanism here. And this is the part that we're conditionally rendering. Okay, so now we also have state values. We have our user interface. Is it too gray? Maybe 200? Yeah, I think 200 is going to be much better for the background of the output container. Let's go ahead and do a git add, git commit -m state. This is our state. Perfect. Okie dokie. Hello, Desert Penguin. Just wanted to drop in and say thank you for the ChatGPT rapper video. I started an application with that video and I'm close to releasing on App Store. Oh my God, thank you very much for the message and congratulations on that. That's the best thing that I can hear from you guys from our community. Using some of our tutorials to start applications, to start projects, to release it to the App Store. So yeah, keep them coming. If you have URLs, make sure to send them to me. I really love to look at the applications that you guys are building. Okay. Whew. Let's drink some water. Don't forget to stay hydrated, because we are just getting started. Our next step is already starting to work for the functionality of our application, actually translating things. For that, we're gonna use OpenAI. For example, a bit later, we're gonna use the text-to-speech functionalities of OpenAI. We're gonna use speech-to-text for transcribing an audio file to text. But first we're gonna use simple chat completion, which is the most general model or way to interact with OpenAI. So it's very similar to going to ChatGPT and writing, please translate this sentence. That's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna send a completion and say, hey ChatGPT or hey OpenAI, please translate this sentence from this language to that language. And because it's a NLP, natural language processing model, it's very good at doing exactly this, translating and understanding text. So that's why we're gonna use it here. It's not actually built for translations. So if someone was asking about alternatives, and I think I haven't worked with, but Google Translate has an API for translations. So Google Translate API. Yeah, we have Google Translate API, and this is actually the API from Google to translate, and it's actually also using AI. You could try to see how to work with this one. In my case, I decided to go with OpenAI because we have already some tutorials with OpenAI and it's quite easy to use and interact. So with OpenAI, to interact with OpenAI, the easiest way would be to simply install OpenAI in our React Native application, initializing OpenAI here, and interacting with it right from our React Native application. That's easy, but that's not secure, because in that way, we are exposing our secret key to the client-side code. And you might think that, yeah, like the application is when building, it's built, it's compressed, but the thing is that with some tools, you can decompress the applications and get access to the API key from your binary. This is not good, and especially because we are going to use our application on the web as well, it would be super easy to get access to our private OpenAI key, and if someone has access to your key, they can use it for their purposes, and you're going to be charged. You don't want that, so that's why a more secure way to interact with OpenAI would be from a server side, from your backend. In cases you're building an application and you have a backend with Node.js, with Python, with any other backend framework, you can install and interact there and provide like an endpoint to your application that we can communicate and get these translations. In our case, we don't have a backend, so we have different options how to build it. There are, again, a lot of ways to do that. We could use Expo router API routes, which is still experimental, but it allows us to build backend or server-side API routes. During the preparation, I tested that as well, but because it's still experimental, I was looking for a different way or an easier way to build that. So for that reason, what we're going to do is we're going to use Supabase Edge functions for our backend or server side code. So these are Supabase edge functions are written in TypeScript. They are distributed globally, and they are distributed at the edge close to your users. So basically, we write some code, we put it on Supabase, and then we can send REST requests, get or post requests, and interact with our functions this way. In this case, our API key is only going to be stored on Supabase in our environment, and we're not going to expose it to the client side. Then we can also add like authentication, authorization to our application to protect it even more. Okay, let's go ahead and start by creating a new project on Supabase. Sign up and go ahead and create a new project here. Let's call it Google Translate. Give it the database a password, for example, this one. Make sure to copy it and store it somewhere because we're going to need it in a moment. If you forget, I'm going to show you how we can reset it. Press create project, and in a second, we should have our Supabase project set up. Let me close some of the stuff that we're not going to need. In the guide, I have here links to some documentations. And the steps that we need to follow is creating a new project, then configuring our React Native application or connecting it with our Supabase project through environment variables. We're going to do that in a second after it's set up here. Or maybe it's already ready. So let's go to the project settings. And under configuration, under API, okay, we need to wait for it to finish. Yes, now we see welcome to your new project, everything is ready. We can go to project settings. Under API, first we're gonna have a project URL. Let's copy this project URL, go back to our application, and we have a .env file. If you didn't start with the same template, you might not have a .env file, so simply create that file and add an Expo public Supabase URL. This is the URL that we can interact with our Supabase project, and then the second part is this public API key. So let's copy the public API key from project API keys and paste it in the Expo public Supabase unknown key. These two keys are used inside the utils Supabase TS, Expo public Supabase URL, and the anonymous key. They are used to initialize the client, the Supabase client. Later, we're going to use this Supabase client to call the functions that we're going to initialize and generate in a second. Now just know that here in the utils is where we initialize a client. Okay. So we created a project, we added the environment variables. The next step is going to be to initialize a local Supabase project that will allow us to create functions. Let's open this documentation at the top. This is the documentation for edge functions. What we need to do is run Supabase init. And if you don't have a CLI installed yet, go ahead and click here the CLI docs, and it will show you how we can set up our environment for Supabase. Go under the getting started, and you can either install Supabase CLI globally, whereas in my case, I prefer to use the NPM version by using npx Supabase. So all the commands that I'm going to see through the documentation, for example, this Supabase init, I'm going to prefix it with npx. So let's go to our project. Let's open a terminal. Go ahead and press the plus sign to open a new terminal besides the one that is running your development server. So in the second terminal here, I'm going to go ahead and run npx Supabase init. This will initialize the Supabase project locally. It will ask me if I want to configure my VS Code for Dino. Let's type Y to say yes. Dino is an alternative to Node.js and is used for writing the edge functions. We're going to have a look at them in a second. And the Supabase init, what it did is create this Supabase folder with some configuration. Now, what we need to do is we need to create a new edge functions. To do that, we're going to run Supabase functions new and give it a name, but remember to prefix it with npx if you don't have it installed globally. So let's do npx Supabase functions new. Let's call it translate first. Press enter. Okay, our function has been created, and if we go to Supabase functions, we're going to see a new function called translate. There, we're going to find the index.tsx. If we open it up, we're going to see the dino.serve, which is the code for our API function. What it expects the name through the request data, and it will return the hello and the name. To run it locally, we should run Supabase start as we see here, but for that you actually need under the Supabase CLI documentation, under the getting started, if you scroll down, you're gonna see running Supabase locally. To do that, you simply need the Docker desktop available for macOS and Windows. For Linux, I think it's also available, but not as Docker desktop, maybe as Docker itself. And after you have Docker desktop and it's running, I can check if it's running here. Where is it? Docker. I believe it's running. Yeah, I see. Go to dashboard. Here it is. I don't have to set up anything, I just need to install and make sure it's running. And after that, from the terminal, I can do npx Supabase start. By the way, running locally is optional. You're going to be able to just copy the code and then deploy it to Supabase. So if you don't have Docker, if you have some troubles, issues running it locally, you can just skip this point and simply write the code and deploy it to Supabase, which we're going to do in a second. I have an error because another Supabase project is running, and what we need to do is copy this code Supabase stop and do npx and then paste Supabase stop. This is stopping the containers, and after that I can go ahead and run npx Supabase start again to start this project, this instance of our Supabase. We're going to start it locally. And by the way, Supabase is great because you can actually self-host it as well. You don't have to use the Supabase cloud. Okay, in a second this should be I just press saved and it put everything into the same line. I don't really like that. That's probably coming from Prettier, right? So after some time, we see that our Supabase local setup is running. It has a different API URL. It has a local API URL. This is how we can interact with Supabase. This is the database URL. This is the studio, so we can open actually the local URL in the studio, the same way as we can do on Supabase, but everything is running locally now. What's cool is that now we can go ahead and run npx Supabase functions serve, and this will serve and run the functions, and we're gonna see the logs from the functions here. Now this terminal is running the function. Let's open a new terminal and try to send a GET request to our function. To do that, we're gonna see here at the bottom an example to make an HTTP request. So let's try to copy it from here and paste this curl command for the GET request in the terminal. I'm gonna try to do enter, and I think it should work. So it's sending a post request to my local functions translate with the data name functions, and back we see an object with message hello functions. That's because that's exactly the object that we're sending back from our edge function. And if we look in the previous terminal, we're gonna see logs. For example, the one that we have here at the top, console log hello from functions, we see them here. So if you need to debug like what data you receive, why is something not working, that's where you're gonna see it. And later, after everything is fine, what you can do is deploy it to Supabase, to the remote Supabase. For that, I think we need one extra step, but let's try it together. We are going to run Supabase functions deploy, and this should deploy it to Supabase. It's going to ask us what project do we want to choose. In my case, that's the why it's not very, it's the first one. So I'm going to select Google Translate. And yes, the function has been deployed to our project that we have created on Supabase dashboard. So going from local to basically production. If I go to our edge functions here on Supabase, we're gonna see a new translate function where we're gonna find like the metrics, invocation, logs, and so on. That's where we will debug it. Now, before we actually write some backend code, let's try to invoke this function from our client side. From our client side in our React Native application, in the index, let's go ahead and create a function translate that will receive a text to be translated as string, and this function should invoke our edge functions from Supabase. To do that, we need access to the Supabase. So let's write Supabase here, and it's going to suggest me to import it from utils Supabase. Remember, that's the client, that's the Supabase client that we initialize here using our URL and anonymous key coming from environment variables. Having this Supabase client, we can use functions.invoke, and here we need to give the function name. Our function name is called translate, and as a second parameter is the options. So in the options, if we don't send anything, maybe it's going to work. Let's go ahead and get the result of this response and do a wait. Because this invocation is asynchronous, it brings data from the network, we need to await, and back Supabase always gives us data and error. We can check console log error and also console log data. And let's go ahead and call the translate function when we press on the button on translate. So the translation, I'm going to return here translation, and we're gonna get the translation by calling await, translate, and the input based on the input of a user. Make sure that onTranslate is also asynchronous. And now if I'm going to go ahead and open the terminal where our Metro is running, basically where ExpoGo is running, that's where we're supposed to see the client-side logs that we are outputting here, the error and the data of the function invocation. So let's write something, not here, but here, press send, and we're supposed to see something here. We see possible and handle rejection because cannot read properties Supabase of undefined. Cannot read properties Supabase of undefined Supabase. Let's check the utils Supabase export const Supabase. Oh, I think I know. The problem is that we updated the environment variables, but for them to take effect, we need to go ahead, stop the development server and start it again. Now the data we see here, environment loaded the .env file, and now if I'm gonna press reload, okay, from time to time that's happening with native wind. The styles are not applied, and I tried to reload a couple of times, and sometimes it was working. Maybe to remove some styles and then add it back. Doesn't work, reload. Okay, remove something, add it back, reload, and the styles should take effect. Now if I write something and do send, we're gonna see functions HTTP error, edge functions return an 200 status code. That's because we didn't send data, but we can debug that by going to the edge functions, translate, logs, and we see here the error, unexpected JSON input. Yes, we didn't send data there, because when calling the translate function, it expects some data in the body that we can send here when we call invoke. So let's call body, and the body should be a stringified version of a JSON. So in our case, it expects name, body. Let's try it like this. Open it again. Do something, and in the logs, finally, we see the message response from Supabase as hello Vadim. That means that so far we have created the Supabase project. We have connected our Supabase client through environment variables to our project that we just created here. Then we created a new function called translate. We tested it locally. After we saw that it's working locally, we deployed it back to Supabase cloud. We saw it here. And finally, to close the whole cycle from the React Native application, we called Supabase function invoke. Basically, we invoke the function, where in other words, we sent a GET request or a POST request to the translate function. We sent some data and we got some data back. Now the connection or the whole loop is connected. The next step is going to add logic to our Supabase function to interact with OpenAI to generate our translations. But before I do that, give me just 1 second. I'm gonna bring some water and we are going to continue. So give me 1 minute, I'm gonna be back. Okay, I'm back. I got a new coffee, the second one, and we are ready to continue. Before I move on, why when I save it puts from the same line? I believe that's coming from prettier. So give me just 1 second. Print width 60. Still. Bracket same line. Is it from print width? I was thinking that it's from there, but I don't know. Hello Shah, how are you doing? What question do you have? Okay guys, so we are going to continue, and our next step is going to be to already start using OpenAI to generate some chat completions. Let's go ahead in the chat completion overview, and we see a Python code, maybe here a notjust code, that we're gonna use something like this. We're gonna have to import OpenAI from OpenAI, create a client, and then generate completions. Let's try to do it as well. I'm gonna copy the first 2 lines to import and create the OpenAI client. I'm gonna clean up a bit of these comments from our, by the way, we are in Supabase, functions translate index. And let's import OpenAI and let's create the client. I'm going to delete the console log as well. And maybe the comment at the bottom as well. Because this is Dino, the way we import things in Dino is based on their URL. Like we do not install them as we install them in Node.js. One trick is going to be to add simply here npm double dots and the name of the npm package, and that way we tell Dino like, hey, take OpenAI from the npm registry. So I think this should work, and the next step is going to be maybe we can just simply copy paste this completion with a console log to see if it's at least working, because I'm gonna tell you that it's not gonna work out of the box, but we're getting there. So let's go ahead and put it in our function. Maybe after, like here, we first get the data and then we're gonna generate the completion. Okay, that's good. Now what we can do is simply, our function is working locally and it's going to automatically hot reload when we do changes here. So we can go ahead and maybe invoke that function with the curl command. This is one option. We see the error. Or another option, if you want to connect your React Native application to the local instance, we can do that as well. For that, we're gonna have to change the environment variables to use the local URL and API key. Oh, come on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out these 2 because they are public. That's so bad. And I'm gonna copy them again below, uncomment them, and I'm going to replace our public or the URL to our Supabase project from our dashboard, from our Supabase cloud, to our local instance. And our local instance information we're gonna get by running npx supabase status. From here, we're gonna take the first API URL, take it from here, put it under the URL, and the unknown key is here. Make sure to copy them correctly, API URL and unknown key. And after that, go to the terminal that is running your Expo application, stop it, restart it to load the new environment variables. And now our React Native application is connected to the local instance. This will be easier for us to test while we are building it. Now, if again it's not taking the styles, and my trick, I don't know how to fix it, but my trick was to delete a style and then put it back. And then reload, do R. Yes, it worked. And now if I'm going to look at the logs where we have where we executed npx Supabase function serve, and if I'm going to send a request now, we're going to see an error. And the error is saying that here, error, the OpenAPI key environment variable is missing or empty, either provide or instantiate the OpenAI client with the API key. So that means that we have two options. We either use API key when we create the OpenAI client, or we simply use an environment variable. Well, first we need the API key, so go ahead on your OpenAI console or dashboard or platform, platform.openai, and under API keys, let's go ahead and create a new one, stream, and create the secret. Go ahead and copy it, and we're gonna need to provide it to our edge function. To do that, I have a link in the guide under resources, managing environment variables. Open this link in a new tab, and here it explains how Supabase and Dino are managing environment variables. We have some default secrets, but we can also load local secrets. For example, we can create an env file under the functions.env, and they will automatically be loaded when we do Supabase start. So I think that's one way to do it. To create the env under functions. So let's go ahead in our project, and under Supabase functions, and under function itself, let's do .env. Not under translate, but under functions, env. And here we need to provide an environment variable called OpenAPI key, like this, equal, and the value of our OpenAPI key that I'm going to copy from here. Okay, we have it here. And if I'm not mistaken, most probably we're going to have to restart, but we can try even without restarting. So let me try to send a request again. Yeah, it's the same error. So let's do what? npx Supabase. Is there a restart? I think it should be. No, there is no restart. Should I do stop and then start? Stopping containers. What is the documentation saying? The env file placed here automatically loaded when we do Supabase start. An alternative is to provide it when we run Supabase function serve through the env file and then the path to that file. But I'm gonna try to do it like with the automatic way. And another thing is to make sure to never check the env files into the Git, because right now, well, I'm gonna show you that in a second. Let's do start. our application has reloaded. Let's look at the previous terminal, which actually stopped when we stopped the container. So we need to run here again npx supabase function serve to serve the functions and listen to the logs, and send the request again from our terminal. And as we can see, we don't see any errors, and we see the message from OpenAI with the content that we asked for. So that means that the function properly used the .env file with the OpenAPI key, and inside the function, when we initialize the OpenAI client, it correctly linked to it. But again, before we move forward, I'm going to do a git status and see that git status Supabase. That most probably this .env file is going to be committed, unless it's in this git ignore. It's here. Let me go into cd Supabase functions and do git status here. Seems that it's going to be ignored, so I'm gonna leave it like this. In the source here, changes, yeah, it's not here, so it means that it's already ignored. We don't have to do anything. Okay, so our function is working locally. I mean, OpenAI has been initialized correctly. Now the next step is going to be to properly send the right data and do the actual translation. The way we're gonna do it is starting from our client side in app index. When we call this translate function, instead of a name, we actually want to send here, first of all, the input, which is going to be the text that the user is writing. So I'm gonna leave it like input. Let's also send a from English to, let's say, Spanish. Right now I'm hard coding it, but I will make our function ready to expect this data later. A bit later, we're gonna have like properly language selector, and this will simply become state variables. For now, I hard coded it. So we are sending to our translate the input from and to. Let's go to our Supabase functions translate, and let's get this data from our request JSON. We're gonna get the input, the to, or the from, and the to. Now, in the completion, the way it works is there is a system message to the OpenAI that sets the tone, or that tells instructions to OpenAI how it should behave. For example, we can say you are a translator. You translate from. And here we're gonna have to insert the from language. For that, I'm going to switch from a normal string to a template string with backticks to be able to insert dynamic data here. For example, from you, not your, but you translate from English to, for example, Spanish. And let's say you output only that translated text, so that it doesn't start giving us a lot of text, just the translation. And that's it, that's the instructions. Maybe you can do better, but this should work as well. And now here is the list of messages. Like in a chat, you're gonna have like a lot of messages between the user and what the ChatGPT gives you, which is the assistant role. Or OpenAI is the assistant. So I'm not gonna need a lot of them. I'm just gonna need one single message from the user with the content input. Basically the input that has to be translated. It uses GPT-4o mini. Maybe I can use this simply 4o. I don't know. The mini might be cheaper, but for web testing, like, this should be okay. And in the end, it shows the completion. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna simply take this completion, I'm gonna stringify it and send it as a response to the client. And we don't need the data, I can remove it just like this. Perfect. Let's go ahead and try it again, because by doing the changes here locally, our Supabase will hot reload with these changes. So let's go ahead and press and do here hello and send this data. We see the response from assistant with content hola, which is exactly the translation of hello from English to Spanish. And if we look in the logs of our React Native application, we have here the choices with the message, and in the message we're gonna have the data, like this message, the content. So let's go ahead in the index. Maybe instead of sending back the whole completion here, it depends. Either we are sending the whole completion and on the front end we are just getting the translation, or we can send here the translation itself, or the message at least. For example, I'm gonna take this completion at position 0 dot message, and this way from our React Native logs we should see we see null. But in the logs, what do we see there? Message. Oh, message, not messages. My bad. Now if I send it again, we should see only the content. Message with which is an object with content. Okay, so that means that in our translate function here, instead of returning translation, we're gonna return data dot content. Well, if data is available. If data is not available, we can default to something went wrong. If there was some error and there is no content, we're gonna simply show something went wrong. Now if I do hello, we should see hola here. Hello, my friend. And we are gonna see hola, mi amigo. Let's go. So everything is working perfectly. I can even remove these consoles. If you need, you can add some error handling as well to show like why something failed. I see here that instead of using the value that we get from parameters, we are using directly the use state. While it's working for this use case, it's going to make extracting this function to, for example, a separate function harder, because it depends on data from the component. So that's why I'd rather use the text as the input. And this way we can call this function from anywhere. We're going to be able to extract it somewhere else, and it doesn't depend on any state variables. It's an independent function. So just like that, how are you? ¿Cómo estás? Perfect. Exactly what we want. The last step is to go ahead in a new terminal, do npx Supabase deploy, but actually, before we do that, the environment variable with our OpenAI key is only working locally now. We need to also set it in our, let's say, production project on supabase.com. And this is going to be done under the project settings. There are secrets. And these secrets, we can also manage them locally. If we scroll down here, we're gonna see production secrets. You can either call Supabase secret set and provide the environment variable or the environment file, and this will copy all the environment variables to Supabase, or we can simply call Supabase secrets set and then the name of the value, the name of the secret and the value of it. Which way do we want to go? Let's go npx Supabase secrets. I'm gonna go with environment file set, and the environment file is going to be taken from Supabase directory, functions, and then .env. That's where we stored the OpenAI key. Let's press enter. Select the Google project that you want to set the secrets to. It was set correctly. And now we can go ahead and do npx Supabase function or Supabase functions deploy to take the local changes and deploy them to our project. This has been deployed. Now to test if everything is working, we can go ahead in the environment from the root project, which is the environment for our React Native application. We can comment out the local one and comment the remote ones. Stop the server, start the server, reload, lose the styles most probably. Yes. To fix the styles, what was my secret? Removing this, saving, adding it, and then reloading. Okay, I didn't know that it's gonna work, but yeah. And now we can test this endpoint there, and we see that it also works. Perfect. So that's our translation API. Git add, git commit -m, translate functionality. Here we have it. ERP is saying, hello, I'm new to React Native. Do you have a beginner level course? The course that I would like, the video or the tutorial that I'll point you towards is the React Native 8-hour course. It teaches React Native front-end and back-end. You can learn a lot about React Native, Expo, Expo Router. But if you want something even more, go ahead to notjust.dev/React Native Mastery. And this is the ultimate course that you're gonna need to master React Native Expo by building 8 exciting projects. We already pre-launched this course. We have 50 students that are going through it. We have 3 modules ready. I'm still working on it, and it's supposed to be ready by the end of the year. And this one is going to be everything that you need to master all of these technologies, to build all of these 7 different projects, even a social media application. So if you're interested in this, make sure to join the wait list, and I'm gonna let you know about the updates and when it's going to be ready. Okie dokie. Okay, the first functionality that we wanted to do, the AI text translation, together with the building the UI together with setting up our backend and everything is ready. Now we are getting into the fun part, the text-to-speech and the speech-to-text. For example, when we press on this button, we want to speak out loud the translation. And the same way, when we press on the microphone, we want to record and use that recording for the input of our translation. Whew. Before we do that, give me just 1 second. I'm gonna be back and we continue with them. First is going to be text to speech. So from a text, we will generate an audio file and play it. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna be back. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. So now, as I said before, the next step is going to be the text to speech. We want to press on this icon and to speak out loud the output or the text that was translated. For that, we're gonna need another API function that will use OpenAI text-to-speech functionalities. Let's go ahead and open the documentation for OpenAI text-to-speech. Here is some samples, how it sounds, and I'm gonna select here Node, and we see the way it works. So we have a file. We have an input, a text input, and back it's going to give us an MP3 that in this example, we're writing it to a file, and later we can play it. In our case, we're going to do it a bit differently because we don't want to write it to file. We want to return it to the client side, to our application. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start by creating a new Supabase function called text-to-speech. To create a new Supabase function, all we have to do is do npx Supabase functions new, and let's call it text-to-speech. This will create the function under Supabase functions, and this is the text-to-speech. Let's open index file, and let's go ahead and clean up a bit this. Like this, I'm gonna save it, clean up the comments, the hello world. And what we're gonna need here is, first of all, the same OpenAI client that we needed in the translate. So I'm gonna copy it from here into the index, and let's initialize it. The data that we're gonna send here is going to be, let's call it also input. We're not gonna have any data for now. Let's replace this JSON stringifier with an empty object. We're gonna see a bit later what we actually send back here. Now with this input, let's look in the documentation of text-to-speech and see what OpenAI function we need to call. We need to call OpenAI audio speech create. So I'm going to copy this part. The part that will generate an MP3 output. For the input, instead of this text, I'm actually going to remove it and use the input that was sent here by simply removing the dots, because key and value is the same name. We can simplify it to just the name of it. This is how we set the voice and the model that should be used. You can read more about voices and models here. There are different voices. You can listen to all of them to see which one do you want to work with. Now, what is happening next? Here in the example, what we are doing is we are transforming this MP3 to a buffer and then writing it to a file. In our case, as I said, we don't want to write it to a file because this is an edge function. We simply want to return this audio data back to the client, back to our React Native that is going to do the request and play it there. What we can do is we can transform this MP3 file, the buffer, to a base64 encoding, which is a string, and then send it back in the response. I don't remember exactly the syntax, so I'm gonna look in the guide, and here I have these two lines. The first one is creating the buffer, and the second one is transforming a buffer to base64. And let's go ahead and copy these two lines in our code. So first we create a buffer from the MP3 response when we are encoding it to base64. And then I'm gonna take this base64 and I'm gonna return it from the response inside this JSON stringified. Okay, let's go ahead and I don't even think that we need to test it locally. I think we can just do npx Supabase functions deploy to deploy it to our Supabase project. Okay, it was deployed. Now let's open application index.tsx file and let's have here a function in our home screen called, how to call it, text to speech. This function is going to receive the text as string, and what it will do, it will call await Supabase dot functions dot invoke. We're going to invoke a function that we just created that has the name text to speech. So text to speech. And as the body, here as the body, we're going to JSON stringify the input, which should be this text that we're going to send here. Let's get the data and error, log them to see what do we get, data and error, maybe separately, error. And the last step is to call this text to speech when we press on something. We're gonna call it in the output container when we press on this volume high icon. So on press, let's define an arrow function and call the text to speech using the output text from here that we want to write. So first we need hello, we need to translate something, and then if I press here and look in the logs of our Expo application, if I press here, we are supposed to call the function, and back we receive this object with a lot of text, and this MP3 base64 is the base64 encoded of our audio file. Let's go ahead and try to play this audio file, and for that we're gonna use Expo AV, which is a library for audio and video. I'm gonna press directly on audio part from Expo AV, and let's go ahead and follow the guide to install this library that will allow us to play the audio file or the audio sound. Let's start by doing npx expo install expo AV. Then playing the sound. Here we see the example. We just create the sound. We do create a sync. And then we do await sound play async. But in our case, our sound is not coming from a file. Our sound is a base64 encoded sound. So if we look into this guide that I have prepared for you, we're gonna simply create it from a base64 URL like this. So let's go ahead and copy actually this part and put it in our text to speech here. So if we have data, we're gonna use the audio from Expo AV that we need to import at the top. Import from Expo AV, we're gonna import, is it audio, like this? So this is the line. And we're gonna do sound create async. We're gonna create from a URI. Here we can provide either a remote URI, a local URI, or a base64 URI. This is the syntax of how we specify that, hey, what follows here is a base64 MP3. And then we simply do sound play async. And if everything works, when playing this one, we should hear the sound. I'm not sure if I have a sound enabled. I'm going to try to enable it. And if I play it, I actually hear hola. I'm not sure if you could hear that, but it works. Hola. Let's take a longer message. Give me a message. I'm gonna take a comment from you guys. Here is the message. Let's paste it. Let's translate it. And let's try to play it. Did I press it? Maybe it takes a bit of time. Or was there an error? Edge functions return something. There was a problem. Let's see what's the problem. I'm gonna debug that by going to edge functions, text-to-speech function, and logs to see what is the log. Maximum call stack exceeded. Why is that text too long? Can it be? I'm wondering what are the limitations there. Let's do it like this, translate, and then play. Hola, solo quería pasar y dar las gracias por el video del envoltorio de ChatGPT. Okay, this one worked. A longer text for some reason failed. I'm not sure why. Maybe later we can look into it. Perfect. So that is the basis of our text-to-speech. To recap everything that we have done is we created a new function called text-to-speech. We used OpenAI and we called OpenAI audio speech create based on the input, based on the data that we send from the client side. Here we specify the voice that we want to use and we get back the MP3 audio file. We take it, we transform it to base64, and then we return it to the client. From the client side, we request this data from Supabase by invoking the function. We take the sound and we play it using the Expo AV as a base64, and that's it. Aaron is saying, yesterday I completed your React tutorial. It was awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate that. That was, yeah, a very nice tutorial. Also around AI. Whew. Text-to-speech, text-to-speech. Perfect. Shah is asking around Next.js for frontend and backend. Now my question is, if I use Next off on web, then how will use Expo the off route for React Native application? But are you exposing? I don't remember exactly the details of the implementation of next off. Are you implementing the authentication logic yourself, like encoding, decoding, creating the tokens, or so on, or you're using an off service like Supabase or maybe Cleric or something like that? Because if you're using Cleric or Supabase, then the way you handle authentication on Next.js is by interacting with that service, and on React Native, you're also going to interact with the same service. How to change language to something else. We're gonna implement the language selector in a moment. The next step is going to be the speech to text, and then we're gonna go through the language selector. Okay, let me go ahead and do a git status, git add, git commit -m text to speech. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. And our next step is going to implement kind of the same, but the opposite part of text to speech is the speech to text. So what we want is we want to record the microphone. We want to record what the user is talking. And then we want to use that one to get the transcription, to get the text, and then to translate it this way. So that's going to be the speech to text. For that, we need to first record the audio from the user. So we're going to start on the client side. The audio, like the microphone, can be recorded with the same Expo AV library. We see here audio recording API. It's also available. It's not available on tvOS, but that's not a problem for us. And in the usage, after playing sound, there is an example for recording sound. So to record, what we need is first, we need to ask for the permissions to make sure that we have permissions to record the microphone. So I'm going to copy this line here in our home screen. In our home, I'm going to use audio.usePermissions. Then we're going to have the start recording and the stop recording, two functions that I'm going to simply copy paste. The two functions, start recording and stop recording. Let's copy them in our home screen after the text to speech. After here, before we return, I'm going to have these two functions. Start recording, permission response. Okay. Let's fix some of these issues. For example, permissions can be null, so I'm going to add a question mark here. The recording should be a state variable, so I will take this recording state and I'm going to add it at the top where we have our state variables. I can also specify that this should be an audio.recording type. Now, start recording, what's happening? It sets some configuration for recording on iOS. Then it actually creates an audio recording async with the quality high, which comes with some configurations. and it stores the reference to that recording in state. After that, it's recording, and later we call stop recording. Here, it's going to do await recording, which can be null, so I'm going to do question mark. It's going to call stop and unload the recording. It's going to reset the configurations, and then it's going to take the URI. Maybe in this case, I need to do if there is no recording, then return, and I don't need the dot here everywhere. Okie dokie, then it gets the URI and it shows us the URI of the recording. Perfect. Let's go ahead and call these functions, start recording and stop recording. We're gonna do that in the input container where we have a microphone icon. When we press on the microphone, we want to, on press, we want to call start recording. But while we are recording, I want to render a different icon altogether. Not the microphone, but the stop icon, right? So for that reason, I'm going to conditionally render if we have a recording, meaning if we're currently recording, I want to render a different icon. So maybe I'll take this one, the circle, for a second. The question mark is here, and here we need double dots. I'm gonna close it here, and I'm gonna stop for a second for you to look at the syntax. So if we're recording, question mark, render this icon. On press, when we press on the icon while we're recording, we want to stop the recording. Stop recording. And the icon, we need the square icon. Where is it? Expo icons. Square, I don't know. Square. Can I look at these two things? Can I have something like stop? Oh, this one. Stop circle from FontAwesome 5. FontAwesome, not 6 but 5. And here should be stop. Maybe stop or stop circle. Stop circle. So if we're recording, display this one, and when we press, we stop recording. Otherwise, display the microphone, and when we press, start the recording. Now I'm gonna test it out. I'm gonna press on the microphone. It says that it needs permissions. I'm gonna say allow, and it's supposed to transform it to a square, but it doesn't. Oh no, it actually transforms it. Then I can press it, and it stops the recording, and it should also tell us the file where it stored this recording. Recording stored at this URL. Okay, so that's the first part of recording the audio file, using the microphone. Okay. Oh, my back hurts. Ryan, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So we are recording a file. Now, what do we need to do with this file? We need to take it, transform it to base64 as we did previously on the server. This time it's the other direction. From the client side, we need to read it as base64 and then send it to the server as a base64 for our server to send it to OpenAI and get the transcription. We are going to use, because the recording was stored on a file, we're going to use the file system, Expo file system, to read that file with that URL as base64. So let's go ahead and first install Expo file system. Let's go here and install it first. And then we're gonna go ahead and do, where is it? There is a function read as string async that will allow us to read the file as a base64. In this top recording, we have a URI. Let's go ahead and do it like this. Const, I don't know, response, something like that. We're gonna use file system. Well, first we need to import it at the top. So let's do import everything as file system from Expo file system. Now using this file system, we can call a read as string asynchronous. The file URI is going to be the URI that we get from the recording. And I think from the options here, map of read options. Read the entire content of a file as a string. Binary will be returned in raw format. You'll need to append to use it as base64. I think we don't need anything. We're gonna have it like that. This URI might be null, so we can put it into a if URI like this. And let's do a console log response. If I look in the terminal and do 123 123, recording was stored there, and we have possible unhandled promise rejection. Calling the read as string async has failed. Why it has failed, I don't know. Let's double check with my guide if I have a code there. Read a string encoding base64. So I need encoding base64. Let's do that. Read as the string async, and in the options, let's do encoding base64. 123, and yes, we have a base64 encoded audio file. It's quite a long one, but that's everything we need to send it down to the backend. In the backend, we'll use it to transcribe it. Okay, we have a base64. Now, we need to create our backend function. Let's go ahead and create a new Supabase function using npx Supabase functions new, and this time it's speech to text. A new function has been created under Supabase functions as speech to text. Let's open it up. Let's first clean it a bit. The comments, the console log, the comments at the bottom. And let's go ahead and first import and initialize OpenAI as we have done in the previous two functions. OpenAI here. And we are going to receive it as the input audio base64. Okay, we can look at the documentation from OpenAI for the speech to text to see how do we have to work with that. The speech to text from OpenAI has two functionalities: to transcribe audio into whatever language the audio is in, or to translate it into English. This would be nice, but it for a translation application to translate it directly, but it only supports translating from whatever language to English. So in our case, I'm going to use transcribe, and then later we can send it again to translate it. The files have a limit of 25 megabytes, and these are the formats that are supported. So the transcription is going to be taken like this by calling OpenAI.audiotranscription.create. So let's copy it. Let's go back. I don't need the data here, or I will leave it for a second. And I'll put the transcriptions. As you can see, the documentation again works with a file. This was one of the challenges that I've been going through preparing this tutorial, because in the documentation we don't have a lot of data about working directly with files with Base64. It's everything related to files. For an application like ours, we don't want to store things in files. We want to transcribe or to send them right away on demand. So I'm going to look into the guide that I have prepared to see how from a Base64 we're transforming to a file, because there is a function in the OpenAI called toFile, and that function helps us transform from an audio buffer to some kind of a file. It's not a file, but it's something that OpenAI will understand and will work with. So what I need is these two lines from the guide, and above a transcription, I will define them. So first, we create an audio buffer from the Base64 string that we receive through the request. Then the audio buffer, using the toFile method that we have to import from OpenAI, transform this one to a file with the type M4A. This is the file format. Then this file, we send it to the transcription API like this, transcriptions, and the transcription response we go ahead and send as the stringify response. Okay, let me double check if that's what we need. Stringify transcription. Let's go ahead and try to deploy this function using npx Supabase functions deploy to our Google Translate project. Now our function is ready, and we can send there a Base64 encoded audio file, and back it should give us the transcription. Let's go in our client-side code in application index, and here we recorded the audio, we read it as Base64, and we simply have to call our Supabase, wait, supabase.functions.invoke. The function name is speech to text, and as the body we're gonna send here a JSON.stringify. How did we call the input? Not the input, but the audio Base64. And we're gonna send here this one, or we can actually rename it and have it like this, simpler. Let's get the data and the error, and let's console log data and console log error. Let's give it a try and see, now that we connected the front end of recording with the backend that is transcribing, let's see if it actually worked. I'm gonna open the terminal where we have Expo. I'm gonna press on the microphone and I'm gonna talk 1, 2, 3. Recording stopped. Actually, the microphone is not gonna work. Wait a second. I was just saying that the microphone is not working on the emulator, but it seems that it worked. Hello, are you working? Hello, are you working? Okay, so disregard my comment. The microphone is actually working on the emulator. But anyway, if you have any problems with the emulator, I would recommend you to press C here to clear everything and use Expo Go on your physical device to make sure that the microphone is working properly. To be honest, I expected it to not work on simulator, and I think it's even written somewhere here in the audio. Emulator or simu. Additionally, audio recording is not supported in the iOS simulator. You see? But for me it worked, which is very weird, but I'm very happy with that. So what do we need to do with this response? We saw the response there as with I already forgot. Hello? With text. So what we need to do is simply do set input data.text. And after I record something, it should appear in the input. Hello? Hello? And then I can press translate to translate it. Or I can call here translate data.text to automatically set the input and translate it. Hello, how are you doing? Hello, how are you doing? And in a second we should see the translation as well without doing anything. Will it? Translate. Oh, it should be on translate. On the translate, or I can do, yeah, like it translate, but I don't do anything with output. So maybe I can just copy it like this. I don't know. We're gonna improve it in a second to be a bit better. I'm gonna delete this one, so I'm gonna translate not the input but the data.text, because calling set input does not mean that the input is going to change this time. It's going to change on the next re-render, so that's why I cannot use here the input. So now if I do set translation, hello there, how are you doing today? Hello Baher, how are you doing today? ¿Cómo estás hoy? Perfect. So now we have speech to text as well, and I can press this one.
Hola, Bayer, ¿cómo estás hoy?
And it actually does the speech to text or text to speech as well. So just like that, I think we can go ahead and do git status, git add, git commit, speech to text. Okie dokie. So that is our text to speech. Perfect, perfect, perfect. I'm so happy when things that seems complicated from the first time, like text to speech, speech to text, and so on, with the right tools, like they're not actually that complicated. It's just putting them together and using it. Okay guys, so the next step is going to be to clean up a bit our code, improve stuff, maybe move some stuff into other components, because our component is already quite huge. It's 150 lines of code, which is not a lot, but anyway, like it has a lot of code and can become already confusing. We're gonna refactor it a bit, improve it a bit, and then we're gonna run it on the web. To run it on the web, like it's not super straightforward. It should work automatically, but it's going to require some changes, which I'm gonna walk you through everything. It requires some changes on the backend, like with some cores. It requires some changes on the Supabase itself. It requires some changes on the styles. So we're gonna do all of that to make sure that our application works on iOS, Android, and the web. And actually, I need to test it on Android as well. So let me press A to start opening on Android. I'm gonna take a very short break to bring some more water, and we are gonna continue the build. So see you in a second. Okay, so Android is not running. Why? What's going on here? Okay. Come on. It's always going to be so slow on my device for some reason. Let's have a look. I haven't actually tested it on Android, so I'm a bit scared. Come on, why are not running? Swipe to open. Oh my god. Let's try to press A here to run it on Android. I don't know the code. Wrong pin. I have no idea what's the pin here. Who knows what's the pin? Android emulator pin. Android emulate pin code. Okay, that's not fun. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to test it here. Zero, 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 zero. One, 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 one. Anyone has any ideas? Let's try using Android Studio. Maybe opening a new one. Prove a device manager. Let's try this one. Why is it here? Let's do wipe data. Yes. I don't remember when is the last time I opened Android Studio. Why are you running here? I don't really want to run there. Let's give it another try. Device offline. Virtual, okay, this one, and okay. Now it's unlocked, that's good. After wiping the data to work, now I can safely close Android Studio. It's downloading the Expo Go application. And let's try again. Okay. Here it is. I really pray for everything to work. Don't want to debug Android issues. Okay, so the styles are working. I like that. Let's go ahead and say hello there. Translate. Hola. That one is also working. I'm not sure if you can hear it, but trust me, it's working. And let's also, okay, it's asking for permission. Let's do allow. Hello there, how are you doing? It's you, and when that is happening, that means that the microphone is not picking up the sound. So that means that it's working. It's just that the base64, like, it's empty, and it understands that it's simply you for some reason. I had the same things on iOS, but that means that everything is working, the microphone is working, it's just the emulator that is not picking up the sound. So if you use it on a physical device, I'm 99% sure it's going to work everything fine. So very happy that Android is working. Let's close Android emulator for now. If we're gonna need to test it again, we're gonna do it later. But we are going to continue with the iOS. And what I said I want to do before we move on to the web is to move some of the things, maybe to separate components, maybe to clean up a little bit the code. For example, in the application index, I think that functions that have interactions with Supabase, I'd probably like to extract them to a separate utility function. For example, this translate, let's extract it outside because it's a function that we give some text and we want some text back. I don't really care what happens here. It's going to simplify the way we interact with it. So in the utils, let's do a new file. I don't know, translation .ts. First function in this util, I'm going to move the translate function because, as I said, it doesn't need like any state. It just works with an input field and that's it. So let's take this translate and we need to make sure that we import it in our home screen, in our index file. But to import it, we need to first export it from our utils. Then we can go ahead and do import translate from utils translation. Okay, now translate is something that needs to be here because it works with the input. Text to speech. The text to speech, I also think that should be extracted from here. I'm thinking should everything be extracted so that the text to speech is also responsible for playing that audio, or it should only give us back the base64. But maybe it should also handle like playing the audio. So I'm gonna copy it from here and move it to our translations. I'm gonna put here things like translate, text to speech, speech to text. We need to make sure to import audio from Expo AV, import audio from Expo AV. And going back here, we need to make sure to import, how's it called? Oh, I forgot to export it. So export here so that we can import in our home screen text to speech. Okay, start recording. This one like is a huge function, a lot of code that I really don't want to see. Like what only important for me is the recording. I'm gonna think in a second maybe to create a separate component, but I cannot extract it to a simple file because this one needs like state variables like recording, and it needs to be inside a component. So we cannot extract to a simple file. We might want to extract it to a separate component. But before I do that, let's check stop recording. I think in the stop recording, this part is okay because this part is about recording, about audio. The rest is about something else. It's about taking a URI and transforming it to a translation. So what I will do is first I'm going to extract it to a separate function here called const speech to text, and this speech to text is going to be an async function that will receive this URI. The URI will be the URI of the audio file, and back it will return the translation. So I'm gonna copy everything from here, everything with the exception of the last set. Actually, I only need these two lines. I'll export them. Or let's go ahead and do everything. Put it here. Now if URI, then call speech to text URI. Now we separated things related to recording to speech to things related to taking that recording and transforming it to text. But this part here, this part here is about my brain is not braining at this hour, but now what I don't like is that this is like actually speech to text, but this is like about state, about setting it in state and handling once we have a text. So I would have another function, probably is the name, audio to text, I think. This is also going to have a URI, a string, and this is going to contain this part. And back it's going to return data.text. Let's call it audio to text. So now in the speech to text, we're gonna have text equal await audio to text and sending there the URI. Now we're gonna take the text and work directly with a text. That means that now this component has state, interacts with state, so this function should be here, but this function can be extracted to that translation here. Audio to text. We need to make sure to import file system at the top, import everything as file system from Expo file system, and everything else is okay. Make sure to export the audio to text and at the top of this file we're gonna go here and import it from the utils. How did we call it? Audio to text. Good. And now, you know what I want to do? Again, what I don't like is a lot of code, a lot of boilerplate code related to recording. Like Start recording is a function that fits on one screen, and stop recording is also a function that fits on one screen. So what I will do is I will create a custom component that is this microphone icon that is going to be responsible for recording. So visually it's going to be the icon for recording, but functionality wise it's going to have all of this low level logic of actually recording. So let's see how we can do that. In the components, let's create a new file, audio recording.tsx. This audio recording will be an export default function audio recording, and what it will do is it will go ahead and return some JSX. Merci. The things that it will return is what it will render. So as I said, it will render simply these two icons, either the microphone or the stop circle. So let's copy this logic. I'm gonna copy it from here and I'm gonna bring it to audio recording like this. In this situation, I can simplify it with some if statements, or I can leave it there as well by putting here a fragment like this. We need to make sure to import font awesome 5, font awesome 6. We need to bring here the recording state, so we're gonna bring everything related to recording here, such as the recording state, the stop and start recording functions, start recording and stop recording. I'm gonna bring them here. We're gonna have to import a couple of things. For example, a use state from React, the audio from Expo AV, the permissions response, which also was there. So let's copy it from here. Permissions response. What else? Well, here is the thing that it doesn't have access to, speech to text. But in fact, I'm going to explain it in a second, it doesn't have to have access to. So I'm going to comment it out for a moment. This part, actually, as I said, I want to improve it as well. Because it's just two icons, we can replace this conditional with a simple if statement. If recording, then return this one. Otherwise, return the other icon. So if recording, return this one, otherwise return this one. Why the size here of microphone? Or this one should be 18. We don't see the microphone icon there because we didn't import the newly audio recording component. Audio recording from components audio recording, and now we should simply render it in the together with this text. Just like that, we have a microphone, we can press, it becomes recording, we stop, and we are supposed to see recording stopped and stored at that file. So all the functionalities have been extracted to a separate component. Now I'm super happy because I will create this component once and I will never look at it again. I just need for it to be responsible for recording, And then the next step is going to be, okay, what do we do with a recording that it creates? To actually make it a reusable component, we should not include logic of what should happen with that URI here, because in this case, it's only going to be possible to use this component here. It should be reusable, it should be only responsible for recording, and then giving us back the URI. Meaning that from the index file, I want to say on finish or on recorded or on new recording, I want to call a function. Give me the URI, and with that URI, I'm going to call the function speech to text using that URI. Speech to text using that URI. We have this problem because in the audio recording, we need to specify that, hey, this function audio recording will have a property called on new recording, and we should also specify the types. I mean, we don't have to, but it's good to specify it, saying that on recording is going to be double dots, a function that will have a URI as a string and will give us back nothing. We're gonna simply call that on recording function. So here, everything is okay. Now back from audio recording, we will take this function, and when we stop the recording, if we got a URI, we're gonna call that function. Meaning that I don't know what's gonna happen here. I will just notify my parent component that, hey, I just created a new recording and here is the URI. And it's the responsibility now of a parent, in our case our home screen, to say, hey, when we get a new recording, go ahead and call speech to text with this URI. And it's going to go to transform it to audio. The audio to text is going to set it in the input, it's going to translate it and set it into the output. So now if everything worked correctly, I will reload to make sure that I take the new things. And now I want to test this component. Yes, it works, and everything is back to normal. Now our home screen is less than 85 lines of code, but what I'm the most happy about is that we don't have any logic about recording. Look at how little logic we have here. The home screen manages the input and the output, and that's it. That's perfect. Where is the... Oh, that one, text to speech. Okay, that one is also separated in a different file. So now I don't need even Supabase import here. I will clean up. I don't need the file system. I don't need Expo audio. And I can go ahead and most probably I'm quite happy with how we refactor it. So I'm gonna do git add, git commit -m refactoring, and we are good to move to the next step. Let me think if there is anything else that I really want to refactor here. No, I think we are really good here. We could extract like the output into a separate component, maybe the input container, but that's not that important. Like now, this file is quite good. And yeah, now that we have refactored it, as I promised, the last step is going to be to make sure that our application also works on the web as well. We could try to run it on the web, and I'm going to press W in our Expo terminal, it's going to open a browser window, but it's going to crash right away. So slowly, we're going to fix all the issues, and we are going to fix all the issues to also run it on the web, and later on host it as well with Tiiny.host. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna be back and we are continuing the web application. And actually we need to do the language selector as well. But what's the problem there with fewer hooks? From where? Render fewer hooks? That usually happens when you conditionally render something. Let me make sure that it still works on mobile. And again, this issue, delete it, save, add it back, and reload. Hey there. Hola. Okay, so now it works on web. It's not gonna work. And when trying to load it on web, it fails on the mobile as well. That's a bit weird, but we're gonna fix it together. So give me just 1 second. We are going to continue. Okay. Let's go ahead and fix the web stuff. Actually, I was not expecting this issue. Something with the CSS. What's the problem there with the CSS? Something probably coming from native wind. Global CSS, tailwind base. None of this cache native wind. What can be the problem? State status. Let's do npm start dash 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 clear to clear the cache. And now let's reload the web page. Because now the problem is something with global CSS, which something that I was not expecting, but let's see. Okay, now it failed, but the problem is not related to the global CSS, which means that that one was fixed by simply running our server with dash dash clear. And now the next issue that I was actually expecting is, as you can see, something with window.localstorage.getItem. This problem is coming from our configuration of Supabase in the utils, supabase.ts. As you can see, when we configure Supabase here, create client, we are using the async storage for the storage that Supabase is going to use to store, for example, the tokens and to persist the sessions and so on. On the web, it shouldn't use async storage because on the web, instead of async storage, there is the local browser storage. Theoretically, async storage should work on web as well. But as you can see, I think I was leaving some links here. In the Supabase, there is this issue of Supabase. Window is not defined, exactly what we get here in the terminal. If you look, we're gonna see window something not defined. So the solution at this moment is going to be to give Supabase async storage only if we are running on mobile, basically only if we are not on web. So from the guide, copy this line from here and let's replace it with the storage line here. So what we are doing here is we are saying if platform is not web, we're gonna give the async storage to Supabase. Otherwise, we're not going to give anything, and Supabase automatically defaults to the browser local store on the web. Now, if I'm going to go ahead and start the server again, I don't think I need dash dash clear anymore. We should pass the first issue. Okay, that's good. We see our project here. Okay, that's nice. What I want to do next is not necessarily functionality wise because it works, but more about styling. Because on the web, I don't want to extend like so much. Like I want, oh, what's going on there? I want to have a maximum width for our container, for our page. So let's go into the application index.tsx and say that, which one? I will, instead of this template string, let's use a view here. Let's make sure that the last tag is also a closing view. And let's say that this view, I'm going to give it a class name. And I want this view to have a maximum width of, I don't know, we can select a value like 24. This 24 is 96 pixels. I think it's too little. Yep. 36. By saying maximum width 36, now our container actually lost the whole width. So besides maximum width, we should also say, hey, the width should be full, meaning you should take all the available space, but not more than this amount, not more than 144 pixels. So now if I do that, it also doesn't work properly. because maybe let me do BG and give it a color. vfull. Why vfull is not working? If I delete max width, okay, this one works. vfull. And on mobile as well. Maximum width 36. Max width MD. Okay, I think that one was too little, 100 pixels. So you can even apply here MD, which is going to be 448 pixels. Maybe I want LG, large, and this will be a bit larger. Yeah, I think that is good, or even XL to be even larger. And I'll delete this background slate. If I want to center it in the middle, I'm going to say that the margin on the horizontal axis, which is X, should be auto. And now it's going to apply the same amount of margin to the left and to the right. And our component is going to take full width on small screens, but it's going to have a maximum width of 576 pixels when we are on larger screens. The title of this, you can adjust it from here, for example, translate. And yeah, now it works better. Let's double check what's going on iOS. Let's run it on iOS to make sure that by fixing on the web, we're not breaking anything on the mobile. Hello, Carlos. How are you doing? Following the live. Are you building it yourself? Okay, on mobile it still works. On the web, it's working. Now, the next problem on the web is going to be if I try to say here hello, and I'm going to try to paste. We see something went wrong. Why is that happening? We can look at first step to investigate these issues is to look into the network tab. So we can inspect, look at the network, and try to send the request again. And we're going to see something status course. Course is it stands for cross-origin resource sharing, which means it's some rules that we apply on our APIs to tell the API who is allowed to send requests there. This is a way to protect your API and to say that only these domain names can access my API. In our case, we didn't set anything. On mobile, it works, but on the web, we need to specify the course for our API. That's going to happen on our Supabase part, and I also have a URL here under the course for the Supabase functions course. So these are the two headers that we need to add to our responses from the API. And with the first one, we specify what URLs, what applications under which URLs can access our API. In this case, we can, with a star, we say that we allow anyone to request our API. So let's go ahead and copy this code, and we're going to put it into a shared folder inside our Supabase functions. So let's go ahead in our, maybe I need to do a git status first. 1 second. Git add, git commit, fix Supabase web and web styles. Now the next step is in the Supabase functions. We're gonna create a new folder called underscore shared, under which we're gonna create a file called course.ts. Here, we're gonna paste the course headers that we're gonna reuse for all the different functions that we have here. Let's go back to the documentation and see what changes do we need to make to our functions to enable these course headers or to add these course headers. Well, the way actually it works is not only when the browser is doing that request, it will, as you can see, it sends two different requests. One of them is a request to with method options to basically check if it's going to work, and the second one is the actual post or get request. And in our case, both of them are failing. So the solution is to first check if the request that was made is options, which is this first request to check if we are allowed to do the next one. In this case, we just simply respond with OK, but the most important part is these headers that include the course headers. This is the first thing that we need to change. So let's take it in our translate function. I'm going to start with translate. And I'm going to do it here right at the top. Because if method is options, I don't even need the input. I need to say only like, hey, if you need options, I will say you course header. These are the course headers. Make sure to import the course headers from the underscore shared file. This is the first step. But the second one is the actual response that we are sending here at the bottom. So in this case, we are applying some headers, but we need to append or prepend the course headers like this. So ... we put all the course headers into our headers here. That's also what you see here. Basically, all your responses should include the course headers. And we need to do these two things for all our functions. We did it for translate. Let's go to, I'm gonna copy this if request options, these 3 lines, to the speech to text at the top in the Dano serve. I'm gonna first do this if request method. I'm gonna make sure to import course headers here from shared. I'm gonna copy course headers, and in the response under headers, I'm gonna destructure them as well. Again, I'm gonna copy these 3 lines, and for the last function that we have, I'm also going to add at the top if request method, return response OK, importing them from shared, copying them, and destructuring them in our actual response as well. So with that, we should enable course, and the last step is to go ahead and do npx Supabase functions deploy. To deploy the new changes to Supabase, I'm going to select my project. And now from the web, if I'm going to send the request again, we're going to see 2 requests. The pre-flight, which is that options, is 200, which means it gave us OK. And the second one is the actual request with the input from English to Spanish. And we can say here, hello there. I'm going to send it. We're going to see that it actually translates correctly. Perfect. So that was the course configuration to make sure that it works on the web as well. Let's go ahead and do git status, git add, git commit -m course. Let's go back and test another functionalities, the rest of the functionalities. For example, the speech to text. Let's press this button. And we hear the hola sound, which means that it worked correctly. Now let's test the microphone, and it's not gonna work, but let's see what the problem is going to be. I'm gonna press the microphone, I'm gonna try to talk 1, 2, 3, and I'm gonna stop. The problem we get into is in the Expo file system read as string async, which is not available on the web, because Expo file system works with the file system on mobile. So the problem is where? Is in utils translations. When we try to do audio to text, we get the URI. We can go ahead and see the URI, but we are trying to load it as base64 using the file system. On mobile it works because file system works on mobile, but on the web we do not have like the same file system as we have on mobile. If we look in the console, we see a log. I'm gonna try to zoom in. Stopping recording, and recording stopped and stored at blob something and a URL to that file. So it's stored somewhere. We just need to fetch it, to load it, then to transform it to base64. Let me check the guide if I have it, because this kind of things as reading, transforming to base64 is not something that I remember from the top of my head. Here is the function that I have, URI to base64. So it has the file system on mobile, but if platform is web, it's going to first fetch, then transform to blob, then convert blob to base64, and then get rid of some parts of a string and only then return the base64 encoding. So let's copy these two files. Not files, but these two functions. Here in the translations, I'm gonna paste them here. Let's import platform from React Native. I'm going to ignore this one. And let's call URI to base64 in the audio to text instead of using file system directly, because we are not sure if we should use file system. So I'm going to do await URI to base64 URI. This function, as I said before, is going to check if we're on web. It's going to first fetch, transform to blob, and then convert it to base64. Get rid of some parts of that string and return that base64. On mobile, it's simpler. We saw that it's using file system read async. Let's save. Let's test it on iOS. Hello 123. Hello 123. It works. And let's also test it on the web. I don't think it's gonna work yet, but I hope that we will not get into the same error. Hello, hello, how are you doing? Hello, hello, how are you doing? So actually it worked. But I'm not sure if it's going to work in all the browsers, because the audio recording part is a bit tricky. So let me try to open it in Safari as well. Let's paste it here. To use microphone, let's do allow. As you can see, something is not working properly. I'm gonna reload, allow, and if I press, it's not recording for some reason. So as I said, the problem is that the problem is with audio recorder that is not that is a feature of a browser, and it's not the same in all the browser. There is this recommendation in the audio, Expo audio, in the poly, under the notes on web usage, we see that there might be some issues on Chrome with WebM files. I was actually having that issues. I'm not sure why now I don't have them on Chrome, but anyway. And the solution would be to use a media recorder polyfill. These are the two options. And this is something that we need to use temporarily while all the browser will have like this media recorder. So the one that I installed is the AI audio recorder polyfill. So to install it, let's copy the npm install audio recorder polyfill in our application. And what we're gonna do is I'm going to import this polyfill. I think you can import it in layout as well. But what instead I'm going to do is I'm going to create an entry file called index.ts. And in this entry file will become the actual entry file of our application by changing in the package.json from main. Instead of pointing to Expo router, I'm going to point to .index.ts. The thing is that in index.ts, we should point ourselves to the Expo router /entry. But besides this, we're gonna import the polyfill. We're gonna import the polyfill first, and then we're gonna assign it to the window.media recorder. So basically, we added an intermediate index.ts file that adds the polyfill, and then we'll import the Expo router entry. So let's go ahead and start the server with --clear to make sure that everything that we have done is still working. Let's check first if iOS is working. Hello, test. Hello, test, it's working. Let's test it on Chrome, Google Chrome. Come on. It's building. Hello there, how are you doing? It's working, and let's test if it was fixed on Safari. I'm not sure, but I hope it did. Allow. Hello there, how are you doing? As well. And hopefully it works on other browsers without problems, because we are using the same polyfill. Whew, perfect. So that was the git status, git commit -m fix web audio recording. And that was probably all the issues, and we fixed them, and now our application works perfectly on web as well. Yep, that's true. And before we go ahead and host the application, I promised you another feature, and it's about the language selector. The ability for us to change the languages from and to, right? So let's go and do that, and later make sure to host our web application to be accessible by anyone. Let's open our home screen, the index.tsx. And first of all, we're gonna need to store the language from and language to in two separate state variables. So we're gonna have language from set language from. Let's initialize it with English. Let's do the same, but this time for language to, and language set language to is going to be Spanish. We're going to use these values instead of the hard-coded text there. So where we see English here in the text, let's do language from, and instead of Spanish, language to. Okay, it's still English and Spanish, but now they're coming from state. Before we select them, I think it's going to be easier to swap them. So when we press on this icon, on press, what I want to do is I want to swap the languages. So I want to set language from with a value of language to, and the other way around, set language to with a value of language from. This is the onPress handler, and now if I swap them, it actually works. And if I'm going to go ahead and instead, when we call what? This translate function, the translate function from the utils translation, at the moment has hard-coded from and to English language. So let's do here translate text from and to, which is going to be two string parameters, and we're going to send them here as an object from and to. Maybe we can even change the name here to input, and it's going to be simple. Input from and to. Now back to our file, when we call translate, I'm going to translate using the language from and language to values. The same here with speech to text. Language from and language to. Now, if I do here hola and translate, it's going to translate from Spanish to English as hello. And if I do English to Spanish with hola, what's going to happen there? It's still going to be hola because it will keep it as Spanish because the target language is Spanish now. If I change it to English, only then it's going to change to hello. Okay, so now we have proper language from and to, but the next step is going to be able to select the language from a list of different languages. So what I'm going to do is I'll have a state variable that will represent which language are we selecting. We're going to use the same component with a list of languages, but we need to know, are we trying to select from the left language or for the right language? So that is going to be my language select language mode, set select language mode, and this is going to be use state initially null. The values that this use state can have is going to be the following. It's going to be either we are selecting the language from, we are selecting the language to, or maybe a better name would be source and target, but we're gonna go with this because I already called it here from and to. But think about it as source, target, or we are not selecting it at all. Now, if we go to Translate, to Google Translate, and if I press on this button, we see that it simply replaces everything that it renders with this language selector. So I'm gonna do that same in our case because it's super easy to do. I'm gonna say if we are selecting a language, if select language mode is not null, we're gonna return here something. For example, a text select language. Right now it's not displayed, but if I go to the language selector row and when we press on the first text on press, I want to set the language mode to from because I want to start selecting the language for the from part. And if I press, I go to this mode. Cannot go back. I think I will have to reload for a second. And I need to do the same on press event to the second text input where we display language to, but in this case the mode is going to be to. This will allow us to, will help us know in which state variable we are saving the language that was selected. So if I press on Spanish, we're going to save this text select language. Okay, let's go ahead and render some languages that we can select. And I provided here for you under the language selector a list of languages that are supported by OpenAI. There are quite a lot of them, not all of them, but what I took from OpenAI website. So let's go ahead and copy this code and add it under the assets. Under the assets, and here let's call it languages.ts. Let's export, let's paste this list of languages, and in our home screen we're gonna render them inside a flat list. So let's render a flat list from React Native where the data is going to be equal to languages imported from assets. For me it was automatically imported, make sure to import it from assets languages. And then a flat list also needs a render item that will contain the value of one language. So for each language I'm going to simply render a text component with the language name. So item.name. Now, if I'm going to press on English, we're going to see a long list of languages that we can scroll through. Let's go ahead and give here the text a class name, padding 3 to add some spacing between it, maybe padding 2. Maybe more on the horizontal axis, like 5. Okay, that's good. And when we press on one of these languages, on press, what we want to do is we want to set the language either from or the language to state using the item.name. So the function that we call here will depend on the mode that we are in. So if selected language mode is equal to from, we're gonna call vSetter. Else, we're gonna call set language to and then item.name. So now if I check Arabic, and another thing is to basically close this selector by calling at the end of it on press set selected mode to null. This way we're closing the selector. So if I choose Chinese, it's going to set it here. If I press on Spanish and choose Bulgarian, it's going to be here. And for example, if I choose from English to let's do Romanian because I know Romanian. I'm from Moldova. If I do here, hello there, how are you doing? How is the weather today? Let's see if it's gonna work. So it understands English. Salut, ce mai faci? Cum este vremea astăzi? That's perfectly correct. And we can select another one. For example, I don't know, Hindi, translate. And this is going to probably display in Hindi. I'm not sure if it's correct or not. Bulgarian. Здравей, как си? Какво время днес? So just like that, we have the selector of languages. Maybe we should also have like a close button there, but you can improve it from here. Hi, we're still here. Yes, we're still here. We are finishing with the language selector here. And yes, let's translate to Swahili. Let's see if it's supported by OpenAI. Yes, there is. Hello, Michael. How are you doing? In which country is Swahili language used? Habari, Michael. Did you hear that? Can you hear what?
Habari Michael, unaendeleaje katika nchi gani lugha ya Kiswahili inatumika?
I don't know if that's correct, but it sounds correct. Let me check if it does the text-to-speech correctly. It's perfect, like it's really perfect. It's so good. It's used in East Africa. Nice. Okay, so that is our language selector. Git status, git add, git commit -m language selector. And the last step is going to be to export and host this application on the web, because right now it's working on the local host, but if we want to share with someone, what we should do is first we are going to export the web version of our application by running npx expo export and -p, which is platform web. And because in our app.json under the web the output is used as static, what that means is that Expo is going to pre-render our pages that we have here, which in fact is the index and details, and is going to export them in the dist folder as simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. Just like that, we have a dist folder. I can do reveal in Finder, and here is the dist folder. I can try to open index.html, but it's not properly working because it's not referencing correctly the styles. But what I can do is I'll go ahead and follow the, where is it? Come on. I'm going to go in the description of our video, and I'm gonna open Tiiny.host by following this URL. With Tiiny.host, you can go ahead and let me delete the previous one, and we can host super easily any website, especially like a static website as this one. All we have to do is compress the dist folder that was generated by Expo, press upload here, and drag and drop our dist folder. We can call it Google Translate Demo, or maybe Translate Demo, not to use Google, and then press publish. Bada beep, bada boom. And our application has been hosted. We can open it up. Here it is. Everything is working. We can allow the microphone access, and we can test. Preba. Hello there. This is a hosted website that anyone can access. And just like that, we have our application here under Translate Demo. And we can try even different. Yeah, the language selector probably should also have a maximum width, as we have for everything. And for our friends from Poland, here it is.
Witaj. Jest to hostowana strona internetowa, do której każdy może uzyskać dostęp.
Okay, so that's our tutorial. That's everything I wanted to show you. And that is everything from the beginning till the end, until we have our application hosted using Tiiny.host. Thank you very much, Tiny, for sponsoring this project, for making it possible. It was so fun to prepare this project. I've been working on it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's quickly overview what we have done, what we have learned today. So we started everything by generating a project with Create Expo Stack tool, and something new that we used in this project is Native Wind. And Native Wind is Tailwind CSS for React Native and allows us to use these classes to style our components. First, we build the user interface of our application, that you see here. And then we got to implementing the logic of translating our text. For that, we have used Supabase and specifically Supabase edge functions. And we created 3 different functions: translate, text-to-speech, and speech-to-text. We use Supabase edge functions in order to interact with OpenAI securely without exposing our API secret key inside client-side code. Then from our project, we implemented the logic of translating, of playing the audio for the text-to-speech, and also for recording the microphone sound for the speech-to-text. We put everything together, we tested it on iOS, on Android, everything worked perfectly. We also fixed the project for the web, and we hosted it publicly using Tiiny.host. So that was the whole journey. This is actually just the starting point. I really hope to see projects that are built out of this one, because there are so many applications or so many use cases that you can use with the base of this project, because this is just like a lot of translation, speech to text, text to speech, and you can build, for example, a language learning application. You can build an application that can allow users to talk in real time and then translate and have a conversation with a stranger by also calling like these functions. There is a lot of possibilities here, and if you're building an application like this with the help of this one, let me know. Find me on Twitter. It's Vadim at notjust.dev. Vadim, notjust.dev. And let me know. Send me a URL, send me some screenshot of what you're building, what you're working on. I really want to see you guys build exciting applications. If you have any questions, the source code is going to be available in the description below. If you enjoy this tutorial, make sure to subscribe. That will help us a lot. I spent more than 40 hours preparing this tutorial, but subscribing to the channel takes around 3 seconds. So go ahead, subscribe, turn on the notification bell not to miss any future videos, because we have a lot of projects planned for the next future, and can't wait to build it together with you. Anyway, it was a pleasure. Take care, stay hydrated, write clean code, and I'm out.